Introduction. Thank you, Perry. Very gracious of you. I also appreciate everybody coming in today. And I'd like to talk about interactions in formulations, but as always, I'd like to get you to think a little differently than perhaps we have in the past. And to start out with, I'd like to say in cosmetic science, there are many instances where assumptions limit our ability to formulate great products. I think some of the things that are partially true, we tell the story that they're entirely true, and that we can't do a number of things, which if we dig further into it, we'll find that we absolutely can. And I want to talk about some of that in a little bit. And these things are all old adages. Oil and water don't mix. Anionics and cationics are incompatible and don't mix. And these are just examples of them. There's lots of, emulsions are milky, except microemulsions, except. Well, these broad statements are very helpful. You can't take them as absolute truth. And I really like to go back to the old days when I started in the industry many years ago. We would have at least one Friday a month where we would go back and try new things to make sure the assumptions we made in these adages are correct. And many times we either found out they were, or we corrected our thinking to have some new things to do in formulation. Okay, one of the things that I think is really very, sounds simple, but a strange concept is soluble and insoluble. Because we know from partition coefficients that nothing is entirely insoluble, that is zero, no molecules, nothing gets in there. Or are things entirely infinitely soluble? And for example, dissolving 50 pounds of salt in a drop of water. So somewhere along the line, these things have to move a little bit when we think about what we're doing in them in formulation. Because many times the solubility of a material classified as insoluble is in fact minimally insoluble, and actually may be above the level at which we get functionality. Polymeric surfactants have very low CMCs, so a little bit goes a long way. And sometimes we miss that. So I'd like to start thinking about perhaps thinking that solubility has to do with clarity, is how we're going to measure it today, because it becomes much more complicated to do it another way. And that really is mostly of what people think of. But also functional insolubility. But let me show an example and go to my video here. These are two things, 350 vis fluid and safflower oil, which are insoluble in each other. Okay, so we can see we put some in. There's a little bit of time that it takes to mix, which is fairly common in polymeric systems. Oops. What happened there? Okay, we'll look at it this way. You can see now from our point of view of clarity, that would be insoluble. But as you look at it, the material is not clear, but it is homogeneous. It will split with time, but it shows you the problem with how to classify it. Is it minimally soluble? Is it insoluble? And that I'm going to try to get away with by talking about things that are hazy being essentially insoluble. Okay, and what I want to talk about specifically is that we've always been told anionics and cationic surfactants, when combined, will not produce clear systems. But you can go back and we will actually find ones that are clear, that are thick, that give good foam and good substantivity to hair. So they offer some great advantages to the formulator. Okay, and just briefly, surfactants make up a large percentage of many of our products. Sometimes a high concentration, many times there's a high concentration. And making formulations is really a study in interactions. As a salesman, it's easy to go in and say, hey, I put sodium lauryl sulfate in water and here's its properties. That's not what we deal with because nobody sells sodium lauryl sulfate dilutions for any application that I know of. So what you have to do is start putting other things in, and almost without exception, these things interact. There are salt effects, there are hydrophilic, hydrophobic effects. There are all kinds of things that happen, but one of the biggest is with surfactants, particularly those that have a charge on them. Hydrophilic and hydrophobic is one, but then there's anionics, cationics, and zwitterionics. And we'll see that there are tremendous changes in viscosity, in foam, in a variety of other things by how we formulate. And today I want to look at anionics and cationics.